Let's bring in our Washington Bureau Chief Political Director, Rick Klein. And Rick, one of the most remarkable things we've seen here, at least in our national poll, it basically hasn't moved since Kamala Harris got in the race.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And good morning, George. Our final poll before the election has a 3-point lead for Kamala Harris nationally, 49 to 46. That's what we showed when we published the poll yesterday. We actually stayed in the field an extra day just to see if there's any late change. Identical. The race has barely budged, as you said, for the entirety of the race. All of that said, there's been some intriguing movement late in the battleground states. The latest and last New York Times Siena polls shows kind of the reverse image of what you might expect. Harris right now very narrowly ahead in Nevada, as well as North Carolina and Georgia. Those are must-win states if you're Donald Trump, and that's a little bit of a surprise. Meanwhile, the opposite is true in some of the battleground states that Harris has to win. Right now, a tied race in Pennsylvania, a tied race in Michigan. That's problematic for the Harris campaign, and it tells you why both campaigns are nervous. They still have to defend what should be safe territory in a very close race.
So, Rick, let's break this down a little bit more. Let's talk about the gender gap, because former President Trump, of course, the clear favorite among men, while Kamala Harris, big lead among women.
Yeah, that's right, Robin. Our poll has Trump leading among men by 5 points, Harris up among women by 11. That's a 16-point gender gap, not far from what it is typically. But if you drill down a little bit more inside some subgroups, you see a bigger range. Among independents, that's a 22-point gender gap. Among voters under 30, among younger voters, that is a 45-point gap. That's a huge break for women under 30. That Harris lead is enormous. The fact that Trump has a tiny lead among men doesn't really weigh that out.
One other constant in this year's polls, Rick, the American people seem to be divided and super angry.
Yeah, boy, is that right. And you see it here. 74% of Americans say we are on the wrong track going into Election Day. That's an astounding number. It includes half of Harris supporters, 98% of Trump supporters. Wild numbers. And those are the kind of things that are just typically brutal for an incumbent party. But, of course, this is an unusual year in so many ways.
Yeah, and as we've been reporting, a huge number of people have already voted, Rick.
Yeah, some of these numbers, yeah, it's a big deal, Robin, because 78 million plus Americans have already voted, and it's going to take a while to count those votes. It's a record number of in-person early votes, but all those mail votes, those start to really pile up. Every state different. Georgia and North Carolina, for instance, we're expecting a relatively fast count. Some of the biggest Pennsylvania counties say they're going to handle things faster than last time, but very likely we're bleeding at least into Wednesday. Nevada and Arizona, meanwhile, they're probably not going to have final votes by the end of the week, and that is not a sign of anything being off. It's what state officials say to expect, especially if the margins in any of those places are really tight.
And that's what we all must keep in mind, Rick. Thank you so much for your reporting.